Hello, beloved one. I am CeeJay Adams, Dr. Goddess on Love and Life. Thank you for returning for part 2 in this discussion on suicide. If you watched video 1, you know that today I am suicidal. I'm watching myself. I'm assessing myself. I have more than 20 years experience in counseling, and I know how to look for the signs of suicide. In video 1, I shared the self-assessment and an assessment you can do on your loved ones to see if they are indeed in the suicidal zone. No one needs to panic. No one needs to call a 72-hour watch on me. I am here to stay. But I knew that right now in this time, while I am so vulnerable, would be a good time to really get honest and give the world the gift of interaction with someone that's right there on the brink. A good friend of mine challenged us through Facebook to be vulnerable, to be authentically vulnerable. The divine has been telling me for the last week or so that I would be soon sharing something very vulnerable with my constituents, with those in the community. I guess this is it. This is where I get to be vulnerable. In the first video, I did a complete assessment of myself so that you would see how it worked and what you could begin to look for in your loved ones. In video 1, I provided suicide risk assessment questions. For more information, visit the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, afsp.org. In this video, we're going to talk about some of the common reasons that people attempt suicide. I call those the stimuli towards suicide. There's never one thing that leads us to suicide attempts. It's a complex mixture of things. I'm going to go through a list of things that have been reported in the media, have been reported in psychology studies, and show how each of them is probably a factor for me being where I am right now. Before I start, I want to say that one of the greatest risk factors to a suicide attempt is that the person has attempted suicide in the past. So let's be honest, have I attempted suicide in the past? Yes. In my teens, I attempted suicide 3 different times. And those 3 times I used what was in the house, prescription drugs that were in the house, unsuccessfully, so I'm here. Suicide during teen years, suicide attempts and completions are very high, leading cause of death in our adolescence. So definitely watch how you're interacting with teens, and you'll learn more as I talk through this series in this video. In my 20s, I also felt very trapped by life and attempted suicide. It's now been nearly 3 decades since I've attempted suicide. I haven't attempted it, but I was very tempted toward attempting in this last couple of weeks. I'm here, I'm safe, but know that past experience with suicide is a leading risk factor. So the other side of that would be, have there been people in the life of the individual who have committed suicide? And how close were those people to them? For example, Robin Williams committed suicide. Although I do not know him personally, I very much love that man and what he's brought to our world. And so when he committed suicide, Many people said, oh, how sad. What I saw was a choice to be done with this life. And so that did begin me thinking about what would it be if I chose that. I don't know him personally, but he's close to me. Have also lost teenagers to suicide in the last couple of years. I know that puts my own children at risk because their friends have committed suicide. What about those who are just reading the news and seeing double murder suicides, seeing rage-oriented suicides, seeing ministers committing suicide? All these different things, although they may be somewhat distant from us, they do raise our awareness and our inclination towards suicide. So, when we see that there's been a big publicized media event that is suicide-oriented, if you have someone around you who may be at risk, who maybe is depressed, you may want to look and watch what they're doing to see if in any way that media blitz has inspired them to think on suicide lines. All right.
Action time. Talk. Do not let death, dying, and suicide be a silent subject. Anytime there is an opportunity to discuss death and suicide, it's a good time to check in with your loved ones. Here are a couple of questions you can ask. Why do you think that person chose suicide rather than some other conflict resolution method? Have you ever felt like the only way to resolve a situation was suicide?
So let me just jump into some of the common reasons that people do attempt suicide. Depression is the largest one by far. Unfortunately, depression can have many, many faces. It can be depressive and obvious, where the person is in a down mode and you just don't see them being able to get out of bed. They're kind of crying, full of emotion. That's the real obvious forms of depression. Less obvious forms of depression are people that are just really kind of numb to life, dull. As I was doing assessment over myself in the last few days, I actually recognized that, yes, I have been in a depression. It has been sneaking up on me. I am very rigorous about my psychological health. And I'm a strong believer that depression is caused by the suppression of feelings. That we need to feel our every feeling, our every emotion, positive, quote unquote, positive or negative. In my mind, no feeling is either positive or negative. But I was getting depressed. So that tells me that for some reason in recent days, recent weeks, I haven't allowed myself the freedom of feeling. And so if you find people around you who are suppressing their feelings, that's a precursor to depression, which is a precursor to suicidality. Look at yourself. Are you expressing all of your feelings? Or are you holding them in, trying to be nice? This morning, I realized that one of the reasons I felt so elevated is because I've had a Facebook challenge where I'm moderating a group, and that means that I am held responsible for keeping the group norms in place. And there's someone on the group that has insistently said, I really don't want to follow your rules. And I've been trying to be loving and kind and generous. And yet inside, there are parts of me that want to say, you are being childish, and I haven't. I haven't expressed authentically those feelings. And so what did that do? Well, it built up in me because I was blaming myself for being inauthentic to my feelings. Because I am so aware of my own personal feelings and energy, I get backlash quickly. If I don't live authentically in this very moment, it's 10 minutes later going to be back at me. For other people, it may be years before they realize that they've been suppressing feelings. I'm now aware. It's kind of like when you use your muscles, and the first time you start using your muscles, they get really achy, and then eventually they cease being so achy because you're using them. And then when you stop using them is when they start aching, because they're so used to being used. And so that's kind of how feelings are. It may take a while, it may hurt when you first start using them, but the more you use the feelings, then you're going to build that muscle. And then when you start suppressing them, you'll feel the ouch because they're not being. So, depression. Is there any form of mental illness? It could be depression, bipolar, could be personality disorders. Any of those things, though, that help us feel just psychologically imbalanced.
Stop stuffing those feelings. It is time to feel your feelings. Every feeling does truly serve a purpose. When you suppress them or reject them, you are at risk for depression, for suicide, and many illnesses. Take time to do a Google search on emotional intelligence and feeling your emotions.
The sense of loss of hope. Hope for the future, hope for the now, is one of the safety factors against suicide. If I can see that the future is going to work out, that this moment is going to work out, then I will hold on to the next moment. But when I have faced disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, then the risks are much higher that I'll give up hope. I am an optimist, and I believe that the divine universe has my back. I believe that all things work together for good. I believe that I am my abundance, and yet there's a part of me that has definitely lost hope in the last couple of weeks. As I said in previous video, I left my full-time government position to go into full-time ministry back in March. At that time, I was so confident that donations would just flow in, that people would flow to A Course of Love and to the other workshops that I was providing, and that wealth would come from places I didn't know. I was really believing the Course in Miracles says that I am sustained by the love of God. And Course of Love says I need do nothing, I need only be. So I was being. I was bringing my ministry, my wisdom, my love to a variety of different locations and giving of myself. But the resources have not been coming in. Clients haven't been coming through the door. And so now here I am, several months later, $320 away from homelessness. Quite honestly, $320 away from having absolutely no resources. And I got scared. In the midst of seeing the challenges financially, my daughter got sick. That meant an uninsured trip to the doctor. My car broke down. Fortunately, it was an inexpensive fix, but it was another piece of fear. My website isn't working the way I would love it to. And so all of these different things were showing up as evidence, quote unquote, evidence that my hope was misplaced. I love my children. I love being a mother. I love being a minister. And I love giving of myself. There was a part of me that began to believe that no one had my back, right? That I was going to end up destitute and therefore my children would. And so my hope for the future was momentarily lost. Fortunately, I have a beautiful, beautiful network of beloved friends and family who have all said, you are not alone. You're not alone. But even with them saying that, I didn't see the evidence of what I needed, money in the door, resources, etc. And so I allowed myself the delusion that I was not safe. Imagine if I were, let's say, a 16-year-old kid facing what seems like insurmountable challenges. I was raised in poverty, and I remember what it was like to feel at times like there was no way out. In fact, one of the times that I attempted suicide was because I felt like I was going to be forever trapped in poverty. So imagine that young person does not have any close friends, doesn't have an adult that loves him or her so desperately, that will wrap their arms around him or her, looks at the job market, tries to get a job, and time after time after time is told no. Doesn't fit into the social norms. Maybe he or she is just looks-wise just off the norm, and so gets teased and bullied. Hope for the future when I can't even see success in this moment. That's a risk factor. It's a huge risk factor. Single moms, you know why a lot of single moms are still on this planet? Is because they're moms, because they have children. What about when those children are grown? If they haven't found their hope for themselves and for their future, they won't stay around. Men who have lost their identity through career losses and can't see how they're going to support their families. There are a lot of reasons we lose hope. Losing hope is a huge risk factor.
Eleanor Roosevelt said that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So true. At the time of suicide, people often have no dream, or hopes for their future feel smaller than the pain of the moment. For more information about increasing hope, consider creative visualization. Jack Canfield is a leader in this field.
Oh, what's another one? Another one is, as I mentioned, that essence of being socially ostracized, being bullied, being should-ed to death. Please don't should your friends to death. I have watched as people have used their own social norms to really create havoc in the lives of others. So what is bullying? Bullying is really taking my belief that I have a right that's bigger than yours. I bully you because you're too small. I bully you because you're gay. I bully you because you're poor. I bully you because you're rich and white. I bully you because you're stupid. I bully you because you're too smart. I bully you because I don't understand you. And because I don't understand you, I judge you. And because I judge you, you have to be wrong. And because you're wrong in my world, you shouldn't be here. Several years ago, I was in meditation, and I got this statement: we kill that which we fear or don't understand. And we kill in a lot of ways. We kill with our words. We kill with our actions, those that physically kill us. But we also have actions that kill people, such as excluding them. I can make it very known by laughing at you, right? Embarrassing you in front of a whole group of people. What else can I do? I can withhold my financial support to you because you aren't living according to my norms. It's interesting, recently, nationally, it was approved for gay marriage, for actually marriage of everyone, right? And I posted that on my Facebook. One of my Facebook friends came on and said, "Are you in support of this? If so, I can no longer associate with you." I'm pretty confident in my stance and what I believe. So I said, I'm for love in all forms, however it can be embraced. That person unfriended me. Okay. That didn't really hurt me. What it did, though, was make me a little sad, because it's one of the many ways that we separate ourselves. So when we use that system of you should be ... or you should do ... as a way of classifying whether people fit with us or not, then we're actually creating a semi-bullying system, which basically says, I'll accept you if you're this way, but I won't accept you if you're that way. So let's look again at the many ways that being outside of the societal norm puts us at risk for suicide. Sometimes we're just a little bit outside the norm, and so we can find friends that will support us. Sometimes we're so far out of the norm that it seems easier to just not be here anymore. In my 30s, I went through a huge spiritual transformation. I had been raised traditionally Christian, and I discovered the world of metaphysics. I love Christianity and I love the world of metaphysics. Hear nothing negative about either. But when I started to explore the world of metaphysics, suddenly I had a whole set of friends that could no longer be with me because I was evil in their sight. And yet I wasn't yet in the world of metaphysics enough that they trusted me because they saw too much Christian in me. And at the time I had young children, and I was a single mom. And that was one of the times where I was so tempted towards suicide, but I didn't attempt suicide because I had young children, right? We shut people out. And if I feel shut out, sometimes the easiest option is to just not be here.
It is so important that we have a social network that supports us in times of need and in times of gladness. We live in a culture prone for bullying and social shaming activities. It is really time to create an environment of acceptance. Here are some questions to consider. Do you have at least 3 friends who will accept you as you are? Do you accept your friends as they are?
Frustration. Believe it or not, frustration can actually be the stimuli to suicide. Fortunately for most of us, not a simple frustration. Or that would mean that every time I'm on the computer trying to figure out my website, that I would be having suicide ideations. But if I've tried to succeed at something and tried to succeed at multiple different things and I haven't been successful, I can get frustrated. this last 3-4 weeks, as I have been escalating, and it's interesting that I myself didn't even realize I was escalating to the point of being suicidal, but as I have been escalating, that every little stressor has become huge, right? If my daughter didn't listen to me, it wasn't just that she didn't listen to me because she's a teenager, it was an affront, more than I could handle. If the house wasn't clean, it was more than I could handle. These are things that normally go easily and flow for me. But because I was already elevated, it was like, what's the next stressor? When my car didn't work, right? A little bit of conflict with my relationships, that's another frustration. And so frustrations building and not somehow expressed can actually become so intense cumulatively that they add on top of what was already there. So if I have suppressed feelings and I've already have reduced hope, thinking, really life is against me, not for me, and I don't feel like I have the social network around me that supports me, and now I'm faced with a challenge that I don't know how to do. New jobs, believe it or not, can be a stimuli to suicide. If I'm elevated, I'm not psychologically ready for all the new things I'm going to have to learn, and then I get into a job that requires a lot of new learning, I can get really frustrated, and that can be a stimuli. So what's my frustration level? How many individual frustrations am I allowing to come in and not be addressed? The more I deal with each frustration one at a time, the less risk I have of being suicidal or having suicidal ideation, right?
Reduce that ball of frustration. We live in a culture that is high in stress and frustration, which leads us to depression, suicide, and significant health issues. Consider meditating, praying, listening to music, walking in nature, getting a massage, practicing yoga, talking with a friend, get some good aerobic workout, increase the amount of time your body rests.
And fear. Fear is another one. Ooh, that's probably my largest stimuli right now. I am so loved. I am so blessed. I cannot tell you, there are thousands of people that love me, that adore me, and I adore back. And yet, in this time when I'm looking at this financial crisis in my life, when I'm looking at this personal purpose crisis in my life, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, I'm afraid. I allowed myself to become afraid. Several wisdom texts say that there's two choices really in life, love or fear. And I would say that fear is even part of love. If you understand what fear means, fear basically says there's something inside of me that I love so much that I'm afraid it's going to be hurt or I'm going to lose it. And so how do I protect it? I have children that I've been worried about their well-being, their safety. I don't really worry about my own. I'm a gypsy. And so if I didn't have money, I'd hop in the car. Then I'd find some way to make money each day. But my children don't need to go through that. And this was my choice. And so I'm afraid for them. Well, yesterday I spent time with two of my really close friends, and we just really delved into the spirit. And what I know is that I am my abundance. What I know is that it is divine will that I be abundant. And I know that at a level, but there's a part of me that still doesn't know that. And as I said, in the previous video, A Course of Love says I just need to be. That this is the time of being, not the time of doing. And yet I don't know how income comes into a house through being. Thought I did. Thought it would come through donations. Thought it would come through contributions, through purchasing of my books, of my workshops. I thought it would come easily. And it's not. And so now I have false evidence appearing real. Right? I have these bills looming in the future. I have creditors wanting money. And I got scared. In this moment right now, since I've taken the time to talk to you all, I'm not as fearful. But I have been increasing fear over the days. And coming back and saying, you know what, it's fear or love. Let's choose love in this moment. Let's choose love in this moment. But, you know, in those moments when I felt exhausted, tired, alone, in having to carry this burden, not willing yet to be fully vulnerable and let others know that I had need, I was afraid. I was afraid I was wrong. And I was ashamed, and we'll talk a little bit more about being ashamed. But fear can come in so many ways. If I'm fearful for my life, you know, bullying. A lot of people commit suicide because of bullying. One of the reasons they do so is they're afraid of actually being beaten up or hurt by someone and having to live through that, which would be worse than death itself. And so that fear. During the stock market crash, right, many people went out and shot themselves. And we see that, I believe it is China that is now looking at having their own stock markets crash. Might that lead to a good number of people afraid financially and killing themselves? I hope not, but it certainly could be a significant indicator.